Yes. Okay, hi, welcome to my 5th episode of my Lunch and Learn video series for this season. My name is Amelia Maddox. I'm a doula and health educator in Greensboro, North Carolina, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Christina Rush, who is a therapist and counselor here in Greensboro with Three Birds Counseling. Is that right?
That's
right. And I'm so excited that she's here. She works with Dr. Paredes, who is also here with Three Birds, who I interviewed last season. We are again in an old mill, and so you might hear, we can hear everything.
Yes.
Everyone walking upstairs, outside, so we might get a little ambient noise. And we also may have a cameo from a very special guest.
I hope so.
We'll see. She's being very, yeah, it's trash now. She's being very well behaved, and so we'll see how it goes. But today we're talking about the reason why I wanted to interview Dr. Rush is because, thank you, is because she works with folks who have experienced pregnancy loss, and October is, okay, you go over there, thank you. October is pregnancy and infertility, pregnancy loss and infertility awareness month.
Yes.
And so this is a very important topic. Of course, it happens all the time. October is just the time when we're talking about it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And you work with folks who've experienced loss.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into this.
Okay, so I am trained as a psychologist, and I originally was working with children and adolescents, and was actually really interested in the co-occurrence of eating disorders and substance use. But along the way, and I did a lot of trauma training along my coursework, but when I started to make my own family, I ran into some big obstacles. So I knew right away, before we even started, that it was going to be a challenge. I just didn't know how much of a challenge. So ultimately, after I think 7 or 8 IVF cycles, I was able to get pregnant. I experienced 2 losses prior to that pregnancy, and then delivered my daughter at 26 weeks, and we stayed for 4 months in the NICU, and experienced trauma related to an early birth and having a child who had significant needs after that. But she's great now. She's growing and she's happy. But we also wanted more children. And as we made that decision to have more children, I'd already known about infertility. I knew about pregnancy loss. I also started to learn about third-party reproduction. And so we ended up having a gestational carrier twins. So I learned about another whole layer of infertility, about reproductive medicine, and also this is probably the time that I learned the most about the need for, or the use of, psychologists in the process of reproductive medicine. When we had gone through our own loss and our own struggles, I had seen an individual therapist along the way. We had seen couples counselors along the way, because it very much impacts your marriage.
Yes.
As well as the individual. But when you also get to third-party reproduction, there's an element of there's psych assessments and more consultation that you have to do related to what's the process of loss now going to be like, not either to be biologically related to your child or not be able to physically carry your child, which is a different type of loss, but one that's not considered until you're sort of faced with it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think that's something that you might not think about at all. So thank you for sharing your story with us. And why is it, so I wanted to share with our viewers some statistics about pregnancy loss. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, and which means some folks, which that's 25% of all pregnancies, which means some folks might experience more than 25% of their pregnancies and loss. Some people might have less, and it might also mean that more than 25% of the population will experience loss. Is that?
Yeah, no, it's a very common experience. And unfortunately common now, also given such early testing. So I often work with people who are also going through infertility. So they're hyper aware of when they ovulated, and they're hyper aware when they can start testing.
Yeah.
So I feel like in the population I work with, they're even more likely to experience an early loss than someone who got pregnant by accident, wouldn't necessarily even know to be testing as early as they are, but this population is. And so and a loss you can experience a loss, through blood tests, even before you see a baby on an ultrasound, or you can have an ultrasound that reveals a heartbeat, and the next week go in and not see a heartbeat. Or you can experience a loss once you're past the first trimester, when people say you can start sharing your good news, and your chances of loss have gone down significantly. And I think that is true, that your chances of loss have gone down significantly, but there is still a potential for loss. And people who experience infertility and pregnancy loss are anxious often their whole entire pregnancies leading up to actually carrying and holding that baby in their arms, because they feel like at any time it can be taken away from them. And they experience a lot of guilt related to that, a lot of like, what should I do? They become super cautious about movements, about food, about what they're eating, about what they're sharing, when they're willing to buy things to prepare for the babies. And it can really take a lot of joy out of the whole experience of being pregnant. And then there's things people say along the way. It's not just that 25% of the population suffers, it's also this like hush hush, no one talks about this loss experience, which makes it feel like, well, why can't we talk about it?
Yeah.
Because does it make other people uncomfortable? Is it not right to share? How do you get comfort when you're going through it if you haven't told anyone you're going through it? And it's a really complicated time, I think, for a lot of women. That's filled with a lot of conflict of emotion, of wanting to experience joy and let go and enjoy it, and then also feeling like I can hardly breathe, or if I breathe too deep, my baby may get bumped from its uterine lining and something may happen.
This is so true. I think that what a lot of folks who don't realize is, and we build it into our culture, right? Like we're told we can't tell anyone that we're pregnant until a certain time, whatever, 12 weeks or 14 or whatever the time is. And then if you experience a loss in that time and you haven't told anyone, it makes it that much harder to find people to support you because you haven't told anybody. I know that's but we've practically built it into our culture.
We have, and some people who are acutely aware talk about how many times have you been pregnant versus how many times you've given birth, and so some people will say 5 and then 3, and then it just is an interesting way that we talk about it. I think also Marie and I actually went this last weekend to the Heartstrings organization, and they're having their last walk that they did, and they've done it for 15 years, and talking to parents who have lost and all the things people have told them that has hurt them, like the baby wasn't meant to be, it probably had a genetic issue, or it was really great news you got pregnant, so you'll get pregnant again. And people who have lost at a later point, when you know gender and you have given the baby a name and buried it, feel like it's extremely painful that no one says the name anymore of the babies that were lost. So I think it's and it just, again, society make it feel taboo and you don't know what to do, but I just really have found that people who have experienced loss, for the most part, if they're bringing it up, they want to talk about it. They want you to acknowledge that their daughter or son was lost and what their names were, and talk about it with them. And maybe not talk about it with them, but more of the feedback we get is just listen, because they don't necessarily need some of the things said back to them to make them feel better. They just want a space to be able to talk about it and talk about it. And some of the women that we talked to had their first losses over 10 years ago and were still very traumatized by it and still were thinking about it. And these were women that had also gone on to have healthy pregnancies and deliver babies.
But it was still something that was on their minds and their hearts.
Yes. Yeah. And I've talked to Dr. Julia Woodward, who's at Duke. She's a reproductive psychologist as well. And she told me early on when I was talking to her that she says infertility and pregnancy loss is like cancer. She says you may get into remission and recovery, but you'll never forget that you had it. And I feel like that's true. People think that once you go on and you have a child, or once you go on and you come to terms with being childless or child-free and or whatever it is, that it's resolved. But I don't think that it is resolved. It will continue to come up for women at many different points. I mean, I think these women who still get baby shower announcements, that can be triggering. Or even later in life when your peer cohort is now having grandbabies and you're not having a grandbaby, it can again bring up all those experiences.
Oh, wow.
And so I think it just continues to be part of your life as if cancer would, but we don't talk about infertility and pregnancy loss like we talk about cancer with meal trains.
Absolutely. And sometimes some of these things that are being said are coming from, people that do care for us, but then also maybe our medical providers might say things that can be triggering or, uncaring to someone who has experienced loss. It sounds like the work that you're doing, it can also be a form of advocacy for those people who work with others who work with people who are pregnant and are trying to get pregnant. So how do you define success? So you see people who have experienced loss in pregnancy or are experiencing some infertility.
Right.
And how do you define success with your clients?
That's great. I love that question. And I guess the traditional answer would be, well, if they're pregnant and then they get to take home a baby. But I work a lot with Dr. Yeltsin Kaya over at CFI, Carolina Fertility Institute, and we've talked about it a lot, that he can say, all right, someone who's had losses and infertility in general in 6 to 8 weeks, I can put a bun in their oven, right? I can get them pregnant, but that doesn't heal or it isn't necessarily the cure or the solution that they think that they want. So what is success? So yes, and for some people, it's the email that I get that they got the positive pregnancy test after so many losses, or the email that I get at 24 weeks and I made it to viability and those sorts of things. But I think more for me, success would be coming to terms with and sort of peace with the process. A lot of people going through infertility loss and struggles in this way have a lot of anger and guilt and I feel like I can offer a place where we can talk about that, where they can't talk about it in general, that they're upset that all their coworkers seem to be pregnant, that they're upset that their sister is flaunting their pregnancy, and that the grandparents are super excited about it and the impact it has on them, and they're conflicted because on one hand they want to be super happy for these individuals who are pregnant and seeming to have effortless pregnancies, or complaining about morning sickness and complaining about tears that they had during delivery, and they're saying, I would give anything to be sick as a dog, to have a C-section, whatever it is. And they're seeing people in their life that they love and care about, or just seeing other people in their lives seem to do it in a more cavalier fashion. And that can be really hard for them. So I think in some ways I feel like I give people space to have those feelings and to normalize it, and then to refocus them on sort of how they want to move forward from here. And for some people it's saying, I want to hunker down for the next year, I'm just going to really work on getting pregnant. And the reason I'm going to do that, I'm going to be a little more socially isolated, and I'm going to give up dairy, I'm going to give up gluten, I'm going to do whatever else I've read that I need to do. But I'm going to look back at this year as the year that I tried my hardest, and I'm not going to have any regrets when I'm older if it doesn't work or if it does work.
Right.
It's also about coming up with a game plan. Okay, so this has happened. What are we willing to do? We're willing to try for 3 more months, and then we're going to go talk to the doctor. And after we talk to the doctor, we're going to come up with a plan. We're going to do IUIs. If IUIs don't work, we're going to try IVF. If IVF doesn't work twice, I'm comfortable. Or is it coming up with a plan to say, I'm 40, my chances of using my own eggs are very low now, and I'm going to move on to an egg donor, and I'm now going to mourn the loss of not having a child. It's biologically my own, but I'm going to be eternally grateful that I'm going to have an opportunity to have a child. So it's coming up with a plan and making peace, or it's coming up with a plan that I've tried my best, I've done my hunkering down, I put in all my effort, whether it's emotional, physical, financial, all my resources are now been given, and at the end of this time, it doesn't work. I'm going to move forward and live a full life that's child-free and try to make peace with that. And what is the best life I can live with that decision?
I love how you can help folks kind of come up with that game plan.
Yeah.
Because I think so many people feel so lost. They don't know what to do next, or they know of all of these options out there, but how do I access them, or how do I, what do I do next? What's the next step? What order should I go in?
Yeah, and some of that's dictated by the doctors, but doctors can also, they're also in some businesses that they can continue to throw time and money and resources at it all they want, but you have to decide how much you're going to be comfortable with, and where are sort of your boundaries, and what are you and your partner's boundaries. Like, it's going to be a couple, in many situations. So the strain it puts on a marriage is also very taxing. So we're willing to try it for a couple more months, but then we're going to really work on coming together and just moving forward together. So, but I like it too. I think it's also, for me, it's about this idea that you come up with your narrative about your life and how you're going to become a mom or a dad at some point, and you play house, right? When you're little, you have babies, you put babies under your shirts, and you pretend to be pregnant. And then, for often I see women who then have decided yes, that is part of my narrative, but I'm also going to have a career, and I'm going to get married maybe a little bit later, and I'm going to work on having this other part of my life. And then they're a little bit older, and they're also traditionally overachievers. So they've achieved everything, but now they're hit with this first obstacle in their life, maybe, that they can't just overcome by hard work and pushing through it. So it's about really helping someone rewrite sort of that narrative. Like, okay, I thought I was going to be a mom and it was going to happen like this, but it's not now. So what is it going to look like for me? And sort of, who am I going to be if I'm ultimately not a mom? Because that was part of what I always thought was going to happen.
Yeah. So coming to counseling can be a way of seeking sort of hope, and some positivity in moving forward. Yeah,
I think it's a lot about hope, and it's about having a forward path, and it's about reducing stress. I think early on when I was going through IVF, they recommended a lot of acupuncture.
Interesting.
And I think they still do recommend acupuncture, and there's some studies, but a lot of the studies are saying acupuncture is relaxing. I don't know if you've ever had acupuncture.
I have. I get it all the time. I love it.
Right? So you lay down, and they put the needles in, and some of them vibrate.
It's extremely relaxing.
Right. And it can be super relaxing to some people, and I also think for other people it can also be relaxing is talking about it and coming up with a plan.
Sure.
So I sometimes wonder if the value of acupuncture is also in that relaxation and coming up with a plan and getting help in that way. So, but interestingly, doctors find it easier, I think, to recommend acupuncture over therapy, right? Because a person who's already struggling to get with infertility, they're not going to be like, oh, and by the way, now you're psychologically unwell, or you're acting crazy, or whatever the person may be worried that they're now being told. I think they're not as often. I think one reproductive endocrinologist recommended a coach at one point for me. And I was like, you probably don't need a coach. What I need is probably a therapist, but you're going to use that word to just be like, Christina, you're really stressed out about all this. And it's stressful.
It's very stressful.
So go talk to somebody. But, and then the other problem, which is probably true in postpartum world too, is that there are so many demands on you when you go through infertility and
Yes.
pregnancy loss with early doctor's appointments and financial constraints, and that you don't feel like there's a lot of time to take out of your schedule for another hour to do
Yeah.
the acupuncture that they recommended and the therapy now and all the other gluten and dairy-free things that you're doing.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. So I can see how, and for moms who just have babies and are dealing with postpartum, like, you want me to schedule an hour for myself when I can't bathe? Like, it's just hard for me to get there.
Completely impractical.
Right, but it's so essential to take care of yourself first. Put on that life jacket and your oxygen mask before you help with your children.
Exactly. And that, my husband and I were just talking about that the other day. He's like, you're supposed to help yourself first, right? And I was like, that's right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Because when we can help ourselves first, then we're better able to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Christina, thank you so
problem.
much. I really appreciate you working with me today, especially since I brought a little one with me, and she's been fantastic.
She has been great.
Yes. And how can folks get in contact with you?
Well, they're welcome to call Three Birds Counseling.
Okay.
Or they can email me directly at Christina@threebirdscounseling.com.
Great.
But yeah.
Thank you. And yes, please do. If you have experienced loss and you're working towards your plan, do contact Dr. Rush. And I know that she can be of great service. So thank you again.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Bye.